I don't really think I can claim sort of the invention of this. Professor gave me the parts of the model and the glue and the instructions, and I just sort of constructed it. But anyway, okay. So we're going to cover 6 things quite quickly, and if there's anything that's sort of not understood, just give me. Just put your hand up and we'll get the questions answered. So we've been talking about arbitrage. And how it underpins all economic activity. And you can divide that further into 2 subsets, not necessarily distinct, but 2 different subsets. So spatial and temporal. And don't let those 2 words let you lose interest quite yet. So I'll give examples. So an example of a spatial arbitrage would be buying a depository seat in New York for, let's say, 20, and selling the same in London for 20 and a half, say. So there are many stocks which have dual listings on different exchanges, and if you notice a big enough discrepancy between the 2, you can take that spread, and as long as the stocks are sort of fungible, you can get a profit of half, say. So that's an example of a spatial arbitrage. But there's also the other subset, which is temporal arbitrage. And temporal arbitrage is arbitrage across time. And this is where the process of carrying.
Maybe switch off the lights because it's...
Okay.
Yeah, thank
Better?
you. Yeah,
Is it okay? So carrying. Now, what's an example of this, carrying something? So, an example of carrying something is buying inventory of a good and selling it forward, on a forward market or on a futures market. So, example.
Well, if you sell it, you're not carrying it. You're carrying it if you keep it and sell it at the end of the period.
Yeah, so you buy the inventory and you sell a future or sell a forward contract.
Or carry it yourself physically.
Yeah, you physically carry it. So you have a warehouse. Well, no, let's not start off with a warehouse. Say an oil tanker, which is a warehouse, I suppose. So buying crude oil, physical, at say $75, and selling 3 months forward for $80. Okay.
When is the $80 payable? Now or at the time of delivery?
At the time of delivery, in 3 months' time.
Regardless, whatever the price is there,
Yeah.
is done.
Yeah.
The price is now fixed, but it's only payable on delivery.
It's only payable on delivery. So you have a profit a gross profit in this trade of $5 payable in 3 months. What would you have to take out of that gross profit though? Obviously you don't get a full $5.
Storage costs.
Storage costs. Storage. Okay.
And interest.
And interest. Well, it's actually less carrying cost, and that includes interest. So interest and storage. Now the reason that interest is included in there is because there is an opportunity cost, of doing this. I'm not going to buy crude oil and sell it forward for a rate less than the interest rate. Otherwise I would just put it in the bank on deposit. So interest is always implicit in the carrying cost.
And the insurance as well.
Yeah, and storage and insurance.
What's exactly the convenience yield in this context?
Hold on, that's... What's convenience yield?
So, doesn't it fit in here? Okay, then forget
It does. That's not at this stage yet, though. Okay. So is this all clear so far? This is all quite clear. It's not that difficult.
Sorry, what kind of insurance or who is?
So, for example, if you're buying 100 barrels of crude at 75, then you have to insure that, and you're storing it in an oil tanker. You have to pay insurance, in case your oil tanker blows up or something, and you can't make delivery in 3 months' time. You can't just have a warehouse, buy a good, sell it forward, because someone could come and steal the merchandise. So that's the insurance part of the exercise, just like in real bills. It's not really a moving factor in this though. It's just an addendum. So is that clear? Okay, you can do this. You can buy spot, sell forward, and you sometimes get a premium for it, and sometimes you don't. So spatial, temporal, and carrying a good. Now, if you're carrying a good, do you have any exposure to the price, as it were? No.
It's locked in.
It's locked in, yeah. So even though you're carrying it, it implies that you have some kind of exposure to it. You don't in our definition. Okay. Convenience.
So what you're going to say has to do with temporal.
Yes. Not spatial. Convenience yield is a stupid name for it anyway. I mean, there's nothing convenient about it, but we'll define that later. It's to do, when we talk about gold lease rates, that's when we introduce the concept of convenience yield. Okay. So, what does carrying a good mean? How easy is it to carry? Okay, let's name some producer goods here. Okay, oil, copper, natural gas, uranium, wheat, yeah, grains, silver, platinum. Now, do you think it's the same exercise to carry all of these commodities? Which is the easiest, or which are the easiest you would think to carry?
Platinum.
platinum, followed by
Silver,
copper, wheat, uranium. Actually, yeah, okay.
That's a tricky.
This is debatable. I don't think you can just have a warehouse and put uranium in it, but you need to have a special warehouse. So these we'll just put all in we'll put these all in fifth place equal. Okay. But the point is that it's easier to carry some goods than it is other goods. You have to be very specialist in order to carry oil, natural gas, and uranium. You don't need to be that specialist in order to carry copper, wheat, silver, or platinum. Basically for those, you just need an empty room. That's all you need. Okay, so ease of carrying is an important consideration. Okay. So the point about it is that with the stuff that is easiest to carry, would you expect there to be much of a premium to carry it? No. Okay. Okay. So now we move on to the concept of stocks to flow. Now, does anyone know what this concept means? Is it familiar to anyone? Okay. Basically, stocks to flow is the ratio of inventory, and I'll define that in a moment, to annual primary production. Now, when you talk about inventory, you should really say immediately marketable inventory. Immediately marketable inventory. Now, gold is unique in this sense. Gold and silver are unique in this sense, because when you mine copper, for example, all of that copper that is mined is still there. It's still there in the world. The point is though that marketable copper in LME warehouses is a very small fraction of the total amount of copper that has been produced since the year dot. So this kind of copper here, the least marketable, this is sort of marketability, I suppose. This would be copper in telephones, houses, I don't know, cars, electrical wire.
Well, they have been consumed.
They've been consumed, but they still have an order of marketability. It's easier to extract copper from electrical wire than it is to extract copper from your house or your car. So you come closer and closer and closer until you, let's say, come to what are those things on the road called?
Manhole covers.
Yeah, manhole covers.
But those are in cast iron.
Well, they're in.
Not copper. Below the cast iron cover there is a wire.
Oh, they're copper in the UK.
There are some copper.
Yeah.
There are always some.
Yeah, they're copper in the UK.
Well, they used to be.
Used to be, I believe.
Well, they're stolen.
Yeah. Before they're stolen. So the point is that you come from less marketable to more marketable, to the most ultimately marketable, which is copper in storage in LME warehouses. Now, if you compare that to gold, there is no distinction here. Because to get from the least marketable, well, the least marketable, as it were, item for gold is gold jewellery. But it's very, very easy to make gold jewellery into 400-ounce bars.
But there are gold wires, but probably not many, so...
Okay, so it's to get from copper and telephones to LME warehouse copper is a very laborious, arduous exercise. You know, it will cost a hell of a lot, you know, and it's not likely to come to market unless copper goes to $1 million a ton or something like that. Then people like Mr. Butler will be proved very, very wrong in their sort of assessment of all of this consumed silver, because silver will come out of nowhere. Okay, so it's not consumed. You know, none of these metals are actually consumed, as it were. You know, they're all there, but in varying degrees of marketability. But gold, the difference, as it were, is negligible. Okay. So when you compare stocks to flow, you look at the annual production production, primary production.
What would you like to emphasize with primary production?
Primary as in fresh, you know, as in supply that's not coming from scrap or recycled. So when you look at this ratio, okay, there is no point in looking at just the stock of 400-ounce bars compared to production for gold. You should look at the total amount of gold that exists on planet Earth as the marketable set of gold. But you can't do the same with our friend copper here. Okay, so is this distinction clear?
Yes.
And is it also clear that it puts a hole in people like Butler's sort of, you know, consumption of silver type thing? You know, it's a load of rubbish. Okay.
At the right price, it's all available.
At the right price, it's all available. You know, if copper goes to 1 million tons, you know, copper will come out of telephones. It will come out of computers, which are just sitting in the rubbish tip at the moment. You know, people will go and search for them. You know, make a minuscule margin or whatever, but they will do it. You know, no question. Okay. So now we have to arrange all commodities by this mapping, which is the stocks to flow ratio. I just need to refer to a chart that really comes in. Okay, so does anyone know what the stocks to flow ratio for gold is? So the amount of gold that is already there versus annual production of gold, primary production of gold. Does anyone really? Okay, it's very high, it's very high. You know, 50, you know, 60, you know, 90, you know, whatever it is, it's bloody high. Okay, years, many decades, many decades.
What do you mean by decades? Until it doubles or what?
No. Yeah, go on, Philip.
Until were mine supply, primary supply to cease, it would take that long before supplies were exhausted.
Well, because the other way, if there was, it would take 80 years at the current rate of addition to double this, or to reach that much stock. 160,000 tons.
Double it, yeah.
You know,
Because exhausted, you don't consume
yeah,
it.
you're going the other way.
Sure.
That's consumption of gold, and that may not be the same as primary production.
Okay.
It's probably not.
Until it doubles.
So the mine supply is around 2,500 tons per year, which comes to, I don't know, 1.5 to 2% of the total stock. And I mean, the numbers are a little bit flexible, that's why he said 60, 90. But the point being, there's orders of magnitude difference between the other ones. So whether it's 60 or 90, doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Okay, so bearing in mind what I just talked about in terms of marketability, with silver, Mr. Butler says there's only 1,000 tons or whatever, I can't remember, in inventory. He says there's a minuscule amount of silver in inventory, but again, he's only looking at the bottom end, as it were, which doesn't really apply to silver. So silver is up there as well, Maybe not as much as gold, depends upon, total silver estimates and whatnot.
There's another thing coming into it, is the willingness of people to hoard these things.
Yes.
Because it would take a fool to hoard copper because of the decline in marginal utility.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense to hoard gold and silver. So, and we don't know how much silver is being hoarded.
No.
This is not in the public domain.
Not in the public domain.
Only very poor estimates exist.
Yeah.
But we do know how much oil there is available for the market for immediate delivery. So it is for platinum and copper and most of the other.
So when you group these monetary metals, the next one, it's either copper or crude, which is it, Rudy?
Well, these tend to vary.
Yeah.
Copper does vary a little more than crude.
Yeah. There's a chart here that Rudy's done, I'll pass this around. But basically, the monetary metals stick out like a sore thumb. It's not like, you have, just minor variations, and gold just happens to be greater by a marginal amount. It's as if they were divinely chosen. So, stocks to flow.
And it's important to point out, platinum is definitely
Platinum.
not a monetary.
Platinum is not a monetary metal at all. Okay, the total stock of platinum
Or palladium.
and palladium, these are in the months versus annual production. Okay, now when stocks to flow derives, it's a function, it's a derivation of the substance's marginal utility. Okay, so this proves that gold and silver have more or less constant marginal utility. Were that not to be the case, then you wouldn't see this. They would be like that. Okay? So it's proved. It's proved by observation that gold and silver have constant marginal utility. Okay? And platinum, which people think is a monetary metal, is not. With only 3 months stocks to flow ratio out there, okay, people think, okay, platinum is more expensive than gold because it's rarer than gold, okay, and people think, yeah, that sounds sane, that's why platinum's twice the price of gold. Then why did platinum go to 80% the price of gold at the height of the crisis? It wasn't as if it suddenly became more abundant than gold. There must have been another mechanism there, and the mechanism was its marginal utility, as evidenced by its stocks to flow ratio. Okay? So is that all clear? Good.
Just add one thing to that, Sandeep.
Yeah.
Platinum is pretty useful, and palladium is pretty useful, and yet there's hardly anything kept around. So it's not the industrial use or the utilitarian use that drives the price of gold. Gold is, very little bit of it is used for industrial purposes. Its monetary value drives its price. And that's why, because it's money and it's at the slowest decline in marginal utility, that's why it's hoarded. And it's been hoarded for 1,000 years, and no other metal can ever possibly catch up, because this hoard of gold is growing every year by 1.5–2%. So I would see it would take 80 years minimum. What Philip said, if they stop mining gold, that supply would still be there. And if, let's say, they decided to hoard platinum, well, it would take 80 years to match that ratio. Not necessarily the total quantity, but the ratio. 80 years of mine supply is the total available.
I would go even further than that, because there is no danger that platinum at one point will overtake gold, because it took 5,000 years or longer to build up that stockpile of gold. So how long will it take to build up a matching stockpile of platinum before you can even consider the question whether platinum can become monetary? So there is really no competition for gold as a monetary metal. Silver is a second one. The industrial applications of silver show that silver is a halfway house between a fully fledged monetary metal and an industrial metal. But really there is no danger that gold will ever be challenged as a monetary metal.
Another thing, when silver was money, was known to be money, the silver-gold ratio was around 15 to 1. Now that silver is known to be more of an industrial metal, it's 50, 60 to 1. So where is the value of silver gone? And will it come back? Well, if people consider it to be money again, yeah, it'll come back. Otherwise, no.
I can, under gold standards, derive the rate of inflation from the stock-to-flow ratio of gold. Is it true?
No, well, no.
I think it has to do with that,
Yeah.
because if the output from gold mines doubles from one year to the other for any reason, the stock-to-flow ratio will change, but only marginally.
Go from 1 to what, 2% or something, or 1 to 1.5%.
Implicitly, okay.
But the point is that inflation, if you define inflation as increasing the amount of gold, which I wouldn't.
You under gold standard?
No, but that doesn't necessarily, inflation, you still have to consider it a basket of prices. Just because the amount of gold is increasing like that doesn't mean that prices will increase linearly with it.
But and in my knowledge, the Austrian definition of inflation is increase of money supply. So if gold supply increases, then that's increasing.
Rudy?
That's going to be part of my topic, the critique of the quantity of money theory. And if we believe, and I'm going to talk about this a lot more, that the marginal utility of money does not decline, then the supply of money has no effect on its price or its purchase power. Put it into your supply-demand curve, and if the demand is horizontal, what's the result?
And Rudy will be going into this in a lot of detail, later on.
Yeah,
but that's a side topic. Inflation, if you want to define that as the rate of increase in gold, it will never go to 10%, Okay?
Okay.
Right. So, now we move on to the configuration of the carry. Okay? Now, I'm going to define carry in a rather simple manner at the moment as the difference between the future price, whichever future price, take the near-term future price, minus the cash price.
It's just a spread.
It's a spread. It's the profitability spread for carrying the underlying good. Okay. Now, for the monetary metals, the carry should always be positive. Okay.
Precisely because the large above the ground supply relative to the flow.
Relative to the flow. Because of the result of them having the highest stocks to flow ratio, they should always be configured with a positive carry. And the way that you show that is by assuming the opposite. So what happens if it wasn't a positive carry? Okay.
Or zero.
0 or negative. Okay. Okay. What would happen then? So if let's say spot silver is $19, and the next month future, the nearest future is $17. Bearing in mind that it has an extremely high stocks to flow ratio, should that ever be the case?
No.
No. Why?
Because there's so much silver.
That it would be taken away.
Yeah.
You know, someone would-
Arbitrageurs would jump at the opportunity of cashing in on that spread.
you know, but let's say we saw spot oil at 75 and the next NYMEX contract at 73. Well, this is perfectly possible, you know, because there's very little oil to begin in the first place. If an arbitrageur wanted to profit from that, they would have to attack an inventory. They would have to have, you know, a fraction of this very small inventory of oil in order to enact that. So it might not be possible then for them to actually take that spread because there isn't enough oil, as it were, for them
And
to do.
the cost of storage is much higher.
And the cost of storage much higher, you know. So backwardation in this set of goods is perfectly possible, you know.
But you have to explain what backwardation is.
Okay. A carry being 0 or negative is defined as being in backwardation, okay? And a carry being positive, strictly positive, is defined as contango. So I'll write it down. Okay. So carry contango. These are definitions. We can debate about less than or equal to, but okay. So those are two definitions. Carry being greater than 0 equals contango. Carry being less than 0 equals backwardation. And a market in a backwardated state indicates, you know, extreme demand for the underlying physical good, the physical good,
The shortage of
and a shortage of it. Okay.
supply.
So theoretically, the variation in the carry for these should be much less than the variations in the carries for these. And that's a function of how the substances exist in terms of their marginal utility, which is expressed by their stocks to flow ratio.
Well, in reality it does, doesn't it?
And in reality, well, we're getting to that, okay. In reality, yes, the carries of all of these do move a lot more than the carry of gold and silver. Okay. So the message I want to make clear here is that the monetary metals should never really be in a backwardated state. Otherwise, it would contradict the fact that there would be something else to the picture that was sort of, you know, questioning their stocks to flow ratio, as it were, you know, which you can't really question. So there's another facet there. Now here is where we take the step up a little. So that was all quite friendly.
Sandeep, one short question.
Yeah.
Would you agree the interpretation, say, live by the monetary metals with known commodity futures, that one also could say if the future is in contango, there are more speculators in the market, and if it's in backwardation, there are more hedges in the market?
You can't really say that. I mean,
I see there's a whole bit, another story for the agricultural goods where contango and backwardation vary with the season. So you cannot generalize. I don't think you can.
No, it's hard to say that. All right, yes, you know, if you saw gold shooting up $55 in one day and you saw the carry rising with it, then you could assume that there is an element of that, you know, speculators coming into the market. But it's not the fact that it's in contango, it's the fact that it's changing more into contango that matters, not the fact that it's in contango.
Yeah, leave it on gold.
Yeah. No, but generally it's not really valid because, you know, those commodities could go into backwardation or contango for other reasons, you know. I mean, if wheat was in backwardation and I suddenly found, you know, 10 million tons of wheat from somewhere, then it would go into contango, you know, as soon as I started selling cash wheat onto the market, you know, so...
Well, then you would hedge. I mean...
Well, no, but the point is, though, that it moving into contango is not a facet of more speculators coming into the market, which is what you said. You know,
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. So it's not, you can't say that at all times, but in some times you can. Okay, so we know from Dr. Menger that there are two prices, a bid, Professor Menger, a bid and an ask. But looking at the carry, and just saying that there is a carry for a commodity, it's just like saying that there is one price for a good. You know, there is not just one price for a good. It depends on whether you're a buyer or a seller. You know, so we have an analogy here. Okay, and it's called the carry premium and the de-carry premium. Okay, and this is good price. So this is warehousing, I say. Okay. Now, the way that you have to think about this is as follows. Okay, I won't draw those first. Let's just give an example. Say spot copper is 256, 257, and near month is 250, 259, 260. This is the bid on spot copper. This is the ask on spot copper, and this is the bid on near month copper, and this is the ask on the future copper. So if you're going to carry a good, as in you have your warehouse, you want to buy the spot commodity, you want to sell the near month, and you want to attack that spread, what do you look at? Okay, you look at the difference between these two, because these are the prices at which you actually...
The long leg and the short leg.
Yeah. So when you're enacting your warehousing, the long leg of it, as it were, you look at the bid on the futures minus the ask on the spot market. And that is equal to 259 minus 257, $2. Okay? Now, let's say I've done that, call this the long leg. Now let's say say I've done that, I've got my warehouse full of copper, and if I hold it to expiry, I will get a $2 premium less my total costs, carrying costs. Okay. Now, what if I suddenly need to unwind the position as soon as I put it on because, you know, I need the warehouse for something else? What do you refer to? What do you refer to for that? Okay, well, the short leg we call this, or you can call it, inact warehousing, whatever the opposite of inact is, I don't know. But we call this D-carrying. Okay? And for that, you look at the cost, as it were, to unwind your carry. And usually it will be a cost. You know, it's not you're not given money to unwind a carry, usually. Okay? So the cost is, well, I bought the spot, so I need to sell the spot at the bid, and I need to buy back the future at the offer, at the ask. Okay, so that's equal to 256 minus 260 minus $4. Okay? So here we have the analogy with the bid and the offer for the price of a good. This is the analogy for warehousing. It is the carry and the D-carry. And these two premiums, this is determined by the marginal carrier, as it were, and this is determined by the marginal D-carrier, as it were. Now, we don't have the time to go through the proper, I can send a paper to people who are interested in that, but there is an exact one-to-one correspondence between prices and carries and D-carries. The only thing that isn't applicable here is there is no market maker as such, you know, in this, in between these two who attacks it, you know. Okay, so we have this concept, carry and D-carry, and it's analogous to bid and offer. Is that all clear? Fairly clear? Okay, good. Okay. So now we have two axioms that are based on this. Okay. Axiom 1 states that a positive and rising carry and remember, carry has a specific definition now. Okay, it's the difference between the bid on the futures minus the ask on the spot price. A positive and rising carry will, for sure, lead to a state of increasing warehouse stocks. Why? Okay, the reason is because out of the set of people who are willing to carry this particular good. They each have, okay, so, you know, there's a set of people, and these are the sets of people who wish to carry copper. They may already be carrying copper, they might not be, you know, but this is a set of people who are willing to carry copper, and they might be doing it currently, they might not, okay? So each of them has a threshold at which they will carry copper. You know, if Philip is a warehouseman, and he says, well, I don't really want to carry copper unless the carry is over, you know, $1, you know. And Rudy's a warehouseman, and he says, well, I'll be willing to carry copper for 80 cents, you know. If the carry is positive, and you don't even need to include the positive part, but that comes in later on. But if it's rising, everyone's threshold will be hit. And if it keeps on rising, everyone's threshold will eventually be hit. And so if everyone's threshold is eventually hit, you will find that warehouse stocks will start to increase. Okay? So it's nothing to do with the fact that it's positive, it's to do with the fact that it's rising that you can say that this will be the case. Okay? And this is analogous to declining interest rates destroying capital. You know, you can make a correspondence here. I'm not going to do it now, that's done in the paper, the professional paper. Okay? But everybody's threshold is eventually hit. Okay, so this is true. This is a safe axiom in my view. A very safe axiom. So now, axiom 2, I can spell it. Axiom 2. You don't need to write all of this down. I can send it later on. A negative and falling D-carry will for sure lead to a state of what warehouses? If that a state of increasing warehouse stocks, it will lead to a state of decreasing. And again, I'm not going to bother, you can make the similar threshold argument here as well. Okay? So is that clear? Really?
Put it in terms of profitability, I guess, on axiom 1, the profitability of warehousing is increasing, contango is increasing, in effect. And of course, that's a countervailing force to the growth of the contango. All those guys.
Yes, exactly. So each time you enact, you know, it passes the threshold, and you take it, you know, it has the effect of doing that. So if it keeps on increasing even after all of you are taking it, okay, you know that there is going to be a there is going to be a glut, you know, there is going to be a glut somewhere.
And so the second one is basically the opposite.
It's the opposite.
So if the profitability of storing this stuff is dropping, get the heck out of it. That will bring stocks onto the market and reduce the backwardation.
Now, in this thing, you're limited by the size of your warehouse. And in this thing, you're limited by how much you have of it in inventory in the first place.
I think a good example is what happened last year with oil. Because
yes,
everybody knew this super contango situation, what they were calling it in oil, made the what's it called, the ships, the tankers standing around everywhere in front of the harbors.
Yeah. In summer 2008, oil was in a, just before, well, prior to summer 2008, the contango in oil wasn't really there, whichever maturities you looked at. And then suddenly, it went like that. you know, and started to jump massively. And this was a facet of, you know, declining demand for spot oil. You know, so if it's not being used, it has to be stored, and the premium for storage just goes through the roof, basically. And there was I remember I was having lunch with a senior economist at the Bank of Montreal, and he said that as soon as oil goes into a sharp contango, that's when we're going to go into hyperinflation. And he started to come up with all kinds of reasons as to why that was, and I just thought, you know, in a room full of 50 people, no one is questioning this idiocy, you know. So I thought, you know, there is going to be a big crash in the oil price, and there was, you know. And then everyone thought, oh, they're building all of these oil tankers, you know, to scoop up cheap oil. They're not, you know, people who build oil tankers do not speculate on the oil price. They were taking advantage of this huge carry, you know, which was 30% annualized at one point, you know. So that's the reason they were building ships, building oil tankers. It was to store the oil. They had no direct exposure to the oil price. They were just taking the carry. And 30%, even less all of your carrying costs, you know, because oil tankers are expensive things, they cost a lot to kit out with people and blah, blah, blah. Even after all of that, you probably would have still made, you know, 10 or 15%, you know, after all of your costs, which was much higher than LIBOR at the time, you know. Unfortunately, you know, it takes a lot of capital to buy or to order an oil tanker. Yeah, which is why the banks are doing it.
And a load full of oil in it as well.
Yeah, and then you have to use the capital to buy the oil. But to store copper and gold and all of that, you know, it takes a lot less capital proportionately. Okay? So the important thing here is the axioms. The axioms.
Sandeep,
Yeah.
did you in your paper define the set of carriers and carriers who are at one point, in view of their opportunity costs, becoming marginal and therefore decarry?
No, I haven't. I don't know who they are. I just know that they must exist.
No, you don't have to identify them,
Yeah.
but you can formulate easily the axiom that, or the theorem that would define the point at which a carrier would become, in view of his opportunity costs, become a decarrier.
Well, no, all you can say is that they will do something if these are changing, if the carry and the decarry are changing, you know. I can only say what they are likely to do from the movements in the market, really, not anything else, you know. I know that if the carry keeps on falling, this will eventually start rising, you know. But it may be a lag before the fall of this means that you have the rise of this. Okay? So, you have the two axioms, and from that, axiom 1 could be happening, axiom 2 might not be happening, axiom 2 might be happening, axiom 1 might not be happening. And from that, you get 9 states. On the back of that. Okay, and it's a further refinement of backwardation and contango. Okay, so it's not as simple as backwardation and contango. It's positive and rising basis, you know, or negative and falling decarry, or negative and falling decarry and flat carry. And so when you go through all the permutations of this, which I'm not going to do here, it's on the paper, you come up with 9 states, and the market will always be in one of these. It will always be in one of these 9 states. And the most bullish, as it were, is when you only have this axiom. And the least bullish is only when this axiom is true. Okay, so contango can be refined to, in definition to this. Not only is it positive, but it's positive and rising. It doesn't actually matter what the absolute value is, it's only its rate of change actually. But that's going a bit further down the philosophical path. Okay. And backwardation, again, is defined not only by a negative basis, a negative or a positive D carry, but a positive and rising D carry. Okay? So we've refined the concept further, okay? And with it we're implying that it's not the absolute values of the carry and the D carry that matter, it's their variations that matter to the state of warehousing.
So what are the intermediate 7 states? Give an example.
Yeah, okay. So one of the states would be, let's say, you don't have 1. So, okay, axiom 1 isn't true. Okay, so the carry is not positive or carry is not rising. You know,
I think the choice of word axiom 1 and axiom 2 is not very appropriate in this
Okay.
context. We have to find some
another word.
better word.
Okay.
Because
Lemma.
an axiom is never violated. If it is violated, it's no longer an axiom.
Mm-hmm.
So it is
What would be the best thing to call it then?
well, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
We have to change these words.
So this is an example of one state. Okay, the carry is not positive. Okay, so if the carry is not positive, it's negative, and if it's not rising, or it's not rising, okay.
Hypothesis.
Hypothesis. Okay.
Hypothesis.
Let's call it hypothesis.
Hypothesis 1 and hypothesis 2.
Hypothesis. So, if the carry is not positive, for example, or it's not rising, okay, so it could actually be positive or negative, but if it's doing that or that, you know, then do you see what I mean? You know, because of the or. If hypothesis 1 is not happening, this and changes to an or. Okay? So that's why I will pass the paper and, you know, you can read it for yourself, but I go through the construction of each of the 9 states. I think it will honestly make everyone a bit tired of it if I went through the construction of the 9 states now. But there are 9 states, and the ends are defined by the hypotheses. And the interims, as in the 7 states in between, are defined by, you know, either hypothesis 1 happening or not happening, and either hypothesis 2 happening or not happening, and from that you get another 7 states, as it were.
Well, you still haven't defined the basis.
Haven't I?
Are you going to put up those curves, the 2 curves, the 4 curves? You started to draw them, remember that?
Okay,
Because
yeah.
that would put into graphic form for us non-mathematicians.
Yeah.
Make it easy to visualize what's happening.
Okay. I haven't defined the basis yet. Don't worry, it's not difficult. So, what we define as the carry, this is the spot, and this is the future. And this is the bid and the offer. So carry is 258 minus 257. And it equals $1 for X months. Now annualize, first of all, no. Okay. Take it as a percentage of the capital that you've committed, so the offer price which you paid, of capital committed, as it were, as evidenced by the ask.
Could you please read it again?
As a percentage of the capital committed, which is basically that $1 as a percentage of 257. Okay. Annualize it.
Well, then you have to say the future is, say, 2 months or 1 month?
Yeah, for X months.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
Okay.
for X months. So annualize it. And I think you all know how to annualize something. Okay, so I'm not going to show you that. But basically, once you've annualized it, that is defined as the basis. Okay? Simple? That's not difficult, is it? You know. Now, the D carry, it's hard for a left-hander. D carry okay. So someone tell me what the D carry is here.
The base, the bit here and the ask over there.
Yeah.
Use a color to
Yeah.
draw it.
Can you see colours if I use colour? Okay. So D carry means that I have to buy back my future and I have to sell spot. Okay. So it's 256 minus 259, which equals -3.
Join the 2 points on the curve.
Yeah. So when you're carrying D carry.
Okay, let's have a coffee break and then we'll still have about 15 minutes
Okay.
For a few questions,
questions,
and if
yeah.
you want to round it off
Yeah.
with your comments.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
You have to, yeah.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, for the purpose of understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is annualizing it clear? How you annualize it?
Yeah, but it was very important information that you have to analyze it, because of the end of contract.
Mm.
So you have to analyze it for every day.
Yeah, to make
Yeah.
the data comparable.
Yeah.
You know,
And also
analyzing
important
means-
information, not just multiply by 12, but analyze it what the,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. You know, you can, if you have direct quotes to forward prices, which are always 3 months ahead, then you don't need to, you wouldn't need to annualize, but you need to be connected to the bullion desk of a bank, basically, who will give you forward quotes. And not everyone has that. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I would like to say something why this is important. Not just interesting, but it's very, very important because as Sandeep introduced this subject, the metal markets are mostly contango markets, and backwardation is always a flashing red signal, and especially it's so for gold, which is the par excellence contango market, gold, because of the huge about stocks of gold relative to flows. So gold is a contango market, but if it comes to backwardation, as sometimes, as in the past, recent past, it flirted with backwardation, that's worse than a seismograph predicting a huge earthquake, which might be on the Richter scale approaching number 10.
Yeah.
So what we are trying to do here is to use this mechanism to predict the collapse of the international monetary system, which is coming, and the best measure you can have of this is the contraction of the gold basis, which is the same as the disappearance of the contango. And at the end, it could gold could go into permanent backwardation, which is the confirmation that the collapse of the international monetary system is proceeding with full force. So we started out simply with the basis, and then we realized that this was not fine enough. We have to refine, and that's how the Cobasis came in, and and so on. And we still believe that this is the best prediction, best method to predict the coming of the collapse, which will be a cataclysmic event with no parallel in all history. Why? Because it has never happened in history that all countries were running a paper money system. In the past, if a country ran a paper money system, this was always the exception, because the majority of the countries were still running a gold standard. Now, what we have is not a single country is running a gold standard, all countries are. By the way, this is because of the United States government putting pressure on other countries. I mean, I'm quite convinced if Switzerland was not put under pressure, diplomatic and other kinds of pressure, even blackmailing, then Switzerland would have, had gold standard. They had plenty of gold. Switzerland was the only country where the amount of money was covered by more gold than in any other country. So they could have run a gold standard. But they were put under pressure, And even to the extent of selling gold, the Swiss National Bank started selling gold as a scrap metal, which is just incredible what it showed. You know, they wouldn't have done it. I mean, they know better than that. But they were blackmailed, I think, several occasions. Paul Volcker, former chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, was the guy who went to Zurich and Bern and put pressure on that, you know, they will do everything to destroy the good reputation of the Swiss banking system, you know, and all kinds of other dirty tricks. So anyhow, to make the long story short, this is the importance of that. So there is a reason why we are working on this and why you should make an effort to understand this. And I let you take over.
So that's the reason why. Okay. Yeah.
Can you just put
Is
on-
it running out of battery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, leave it run, it doesn't matter. It has to.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Just a short question.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing something on the
Mm.
terminology. The basis for what, of what, or how do you understand the basis?
Yeah.
Gold base.
Gold basis. So it's the basis with whatever substance you're referring to.
And there's also silver base,
There's the silver basis as well, you know.
and copper bases and so on.
Anything that has a futures market or a forward market has a basis.
So
Has
the
a-
basis, the difference between the future price and the spot price,
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
annualized
Yeah.
in percentage.
Yeah. At the correct points, as in not just the difference, but with reference to the ask and the bid and the
Okay.
And it's not just splitting hairs, this. If you think this is splitting hairs, then the bid and offer is splitting hairs, you know. Okay, so it's not splitting hairs.
It's another question how easy it is to get the quotes.
Oh, yeah.
Because some of these are in the public domain,
Yeah.
and some of the others you have to infer.
Yeah. I mean, luckily COMEX is quite a liquid market, you know, and you know, I don't know whether we have time to go into it here, but the correct calculation of gold lease rates, you know, when you look on Kitco, it sometimes has negative lease rates. That's stupid, okay? And there's been a whole army of people who talk about negative lease rates and what does this mean, when they don't realise it's just because of an error or something that is overlooked in a calculation. Okay, so they will look at, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but they will look at something called the gold forward rate minus the LIBOR rate. Okay, now those two rates are actually calculated. You get the bullion banks and you get the commercial banks as well. And they give the quotes at which they can borrow money off the market. You take the extremities off and then you take the average of what's left, and that's the figure that you see. So the figure that you see might not actually exist, you know, it's not even a median figure, you know. And then so you're taking the difference of two numbers which are average numbers, which might not actually represent anyone's true cost. You know, so of course, you know, when you're looking at the difference of things that are very small, you know, this kind of error, this kind of oversight means that you'll have something like negative lease rates. Now I can calculate exactly what the greatest lower bound for the bid lease rate is, and the least upper bound for the offer on the lease rate is from the carry and the D-carry to get a proper spread on what the gold lease rate bid offer is across different maturities, with none of this rubbish of negative lease rates coming along. That is another paper though, so that is coming up, but it's on the back of Professor's response to this blog, which was a FOA. I don't know who they are, but it was a very good blog, and then they started bashing the bankers and accusing them of fraud and manipulating the basis. Now, it's a very erudite set of people who truly know what the basis and the Cobasis are saying, and if you go through how much they would spent in order to keep the market in contango, I came up with a number that was almost on par with the amount that's spent so far to prop up the world financial system. So I just think it's unlikely, that's all. It's not, you need physical gold ultimately to manipulate the basis, for extended periods of time. You can't just operate at the futures market. So obviously having sort of gold resources to do that, it's not infinite, certainly not infinite. Mark?
Could you perhaps, picture us a graph of the basis, what perhaps the professor referred, like this seismograph? It never got negative, is this correct?
No, well, yeah, the basis can go negative. It usually does. Okay, so if you look at the typical sort of evolution.
Yeah.
So December gold versus December gold. The basis will be here, and the Cobasis will be here. And what happens is, as you go into expiry, you roll to the next contract. And because you're rolling to the next contract, this tends to come down as you approach expiry, and this tends to come up. So this always happens as you come into expiry. The basis, the Cobasis will tend to rise, and the basis will tend to fall, because people switch from, and they do it they do it at least 30 days before the actual contract expires. Okay, they start to switch to the next contract.
Exchange rules force them to declare whether they want to take delivery or they want to roll.
Very interesting. Exchange rules. So that you have to do that. So this is the normal topology. Okay. So what you can say is that if you're coming into expiry, but suddenly this starts to happen, that shouldn't be happening. And if that is happening, usually this will be happening as well. Okay. This doesn't always happen. Okay, it's happened.
It's very rare.
It's very rare. It happened twice since I've been doing the service. Once at the peak in last year, at the end of last year, and once at the peak now, when it was at 1268 or whatever it was. It started to do this. So it shouldn't do that. So rising positive.
It means that people are taking delivery of
No, this means you get back to.
What does that mean?
Basically, because this is it's positive and rising, and negative and falling. It means that you're going from,
in the last minute, as it were.
Yeah. It means that you go from sort of, backwardation proper, contango. It means that you switch from, one of these states straight to that. And it means that the price is likely to fall.
So, big new supply.
Yeah, or lack of purchase of physical or something like that at that price. Yeah, because the last time that this happened was in I can't remember what report it was.
November or December.
No, it was in November, and when we reached the 1268 level, whenever that was, a few months ago or whatever that was. May, yeah. So it happened in November and May. So just as everybody else on the planet was saying gold is about to break out and, this is it, I was saying...
Who's really responsible for
that? I don't know. Because I would say...
Is it manipulation or is it a natural...
I think that it was natural, because what would have happened was that gold must have been climbing, but the actual physical bid for gold was dropping away. So the only people that were actually buying gold were the speculators.
Short covering
or going long. You don't know. But the point is that if it was doing that, there is no one purchasing physical, as much as they are purchasing futures.
An explosion in paper gold.
Yeah.
Well, that could be manipulated.
That could be manipulated, but to me, if you see that happening as the price is rising, it's just some fool on Wall Street or some hedge funds, collectively just piling into gold or whatever. And that they are very fickle.
But why would they do it right at expiry?
It just happened to coincide probably. Because normally...
Accident.
Yeah, it was just accidental.
That's why it's so rare.
Yeah, that's why it's so rare.
Because it wouldn't show up that drastically if it happened another time.
It might only show up, if it was here, it might be certainly less obvious. But because you're coming into expiry, and that it has to follow this shape, I call it going against the grain when this happens, because it shouldn't happen,
And how does it resolve itself?
This resolved itself by falling $100.
That's
yeah. So I was writing calls, as it were.
Which was very well predicted by the Boolean basis.
Yeah. So it has its uses, and by its very nature, it will tell you, it's more likely to tell you bearish signals than bullish signals, because the ultimate bullish signal is when the Cobasis just goes positive and stays positive. And that happens very, very rarely.
even more rarely than this.
It's probably equal rarity, actually, at the moment. Equal rarity. But I've got no reason to assume that will stay the
So
same.
if you want to have a pre-warning of the collapse of the monetary system, this is what you are looking for.
This is what I'm looking for, And, what happened in the expiry as we were rolling from August to December was that it did go positive. The Cobasis went positive, which is backwardation.
Last year or
This year. This is what what the FOFOA blog was talking about.
Okay.
But I said, look, you can't read too much into it because sometimes it does happen as you're coming into expiry, and especially if you've got massive pressure from people rolling from that contract into the next one, And then they tried to compare it to what happened at the end of 2008 when it went into backwardation proper. Because back then, obviously, as you're rolling, the near month might go into backwardation, but the next month certainly shouldn't, because you're buying that one. So if both of the months go into backwardation, which is what happened back then, then you can say something. But ad hoc, especially as people are liquidating an expiring contract, you can't really say that much. Really.
What happens to the basis when the co-basis goes up? Does the basis confirm that or contradict that, or does it really matter?
They can behave independently. This could start rising and this could just stay flat.
No, when you said the ultimate signal is the red line going up.
Yeah.
Would the green line...
Oh, yeah, that would be negative. Yeah,
If that one also goes negative, that would strengthen the signal, would it?
If this is positive, that has to be negative.
Has to be, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good point.
Yeah.
So, could you explain that why it never happens that the co-basis is positive and the basis is...
Because you get the offer is above the bid. You can back it up. I remember you asked that in Canberra as well. Yeah. But if the co-basis is positive, the basis will always be negative.
So they cross at the same point, the zero level, they both cross at the same time?
They could. If the basis is negative, it doesn't mean that the co-basis is positive though. Okay, so it's not symmetrical. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if the basis can be negative, you can have this situation. You can have this situation like this,
And this has no special significance?
No, I mean, it does, but only within the context of other things though. Mm-hmm. That is, it's one of the states,
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the states.
So the co-basis is in the driving seat, because if it crosses over...
Definitely.
Could you draw another one where the co-basis crosses over to positive territory? Yeah. And then the basis has to immediately fall to negative.
To negative, yeah. So it would actually be the form.
Have to cross the circle.
Yeah. It would probably be something like, it doesn't need to do it at the same time, it could have done it before,
Before?
Yeah.
But not later?
Not later. Not later. So that's what would happen. Yeah.
And that is the flashing red light?
That's the flashing red light, yeah. So the co-basis, as Professor just said, is always in the driving seat.
And that way, in this particular scenario.
No, but even still, I place more importance on the co-basis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
At any time?
Not at any time, but just sort of in my head, I always have, because usually the basis is already negative, 30 days before contract expiry.
Uh-huh.
But this is very rarely, it's never positive, so that's why it's more refined from that perspective,
And when it's positive, it means you do the reverse cash and carry arbitrage with gold. And
well, you could sell spot and buy forward, buy the future for as long as COMEX doesn't default.
Because everybody wants the physical is in demand.
So the market is basically paying you a premium to take the carry off of you as a private individual.
Sandeep, sorry. When are you compelled to conclude that this is permanent?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't come to that yet. I don't know. Because what happens is it comes in, comes out, comes in, comes out. I think it will just come in and come out, and it will just take longer and longer and longer for it to come out again. And then it's up to pedantry as to how you define permanence.
But you can still say something, because all this means that people will not sell gold, people who have it. you know, an advance of $100 in gold price will not make them sell, because they are certain that this is it, that the monetary system is in an advanced state of decay, and they just have to hang on. And that's it. So if you want to reformulate the question, it is, well, when will people decide that they should not sell gold at any price? That's when it will happen. But, I mean, how can you predict the state of mind of all the people who have physical gold?
But your best guess is that it will be tested a few times.
Yeah, that's the most likely scenario, that it will be tested, and each test will show that the system cannot take that much strain, something has to give, and then bingo. Well, I'm sorry to say that we are out of time, and I would love to continue this, but we are not going to miss the boat. So on the boat, I think you can continue asking questions. You are coming. Oh, very good. So let's continue. It's a long boat trip. You can enjoy the scenery and also the intellectual challenge.
Is there also a possibility to eat on the boat?
I'm going. Yeah, because I don't think.
No, to eat on the boat.
Eat on the boat? I doubt it. So you better take advantage of this hour.